Donald Trump's humiliating U-turn on tariffs is just another symptom of a wider phenomenon, and that is the decline, the fall of the West, the end of Western hegemony on this planet, which has persisted for hundreds of years, with US leadership of that hegemony persisting, of course, since the end of World War II. Now, the US imposed tariffs on goods arriving from most countries on Earth, but with stock markets plunging and crucially a US bond market fire sale, that is, investors started dumping US government debt, he was forced to retreat, instead resorting to a 10% import tax rate across the board pending supposed negotiations. But meanwhile, the main strategic opponent of the US, China, was hit with even bigger tariffs of 125%. That's so high, it's in effect a trade embargo on China, certainly, of course, a full-on trade war with the second largest economy on the face of the earth. Now, obviously, these tariffs are not actually levied on these countries. It means that American companies who import goods have to pay this massive tax, and generally speaking, they pass that cost onto the consumer, and that deters people from buying a product which has become far more expensive. Throughout Trump's public career, he's been an advocate, of course, of tariffs, which he has called the most beautiful word.
I'm a big believer in tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich.
He thinks he can use tariffs as a weapon to undo globalization in a way that favors the US economy. For example, by bringing back manufacturing, which has been exported to countries where workers are paid a lot less. Now, he advocated sweeping tariffs in his presidential campaign, but clearly a lot of people just thought, wow, that's rhetoric, isn't it? Off he goes. What's he like? And they also went off his first term when there was a very sizable gap between his rhetoric and his actual behavior, not least given in practice he forged a pact with the old Republican administration. But Trump 2.0 is Trump Unleashed, where he's committed to doing all the things he always wanted to do. Now, before talking about US decline, it's worth noting an insider trading scandal is brewing. Let's just listen to Chris Murphy, the US Democrat senator, unpack that.
So I have questions about the tariff announcements today. Who benefited and who made money? And this should matter to you too, because this could be an enormous scam. What we know is that about 9:30 today, Trump posts on social media that people should buy. It's a good time to buy. And then 3 hours later, guess what? He announces that there's going to be a 90-day suspension of many of the tariffs. Predictably, the market, which had been crashing, shoots up, and anyone who made investments early today likely made a lot of money. And so the question is, who close to Trump knew that he was going to suspend the tariffs? Which of his Mar-a-Lago friends or his billionaire advisors were able to capitalize on that inside information? Why did Trump send out that post to his supporters earlier in the day? The bottom line is that the chaotic nature of this tariff policy, with Trump's position changing every single hour, gives ample opportunity for any individual who has early access to information about the White House's change in position to make boatloads of money, either by investing at the right time or pulling their money out of the market at the right time. This entire White House is one giant grift. Donald Trump and his friends are in power in order to use their access to government to make money. It stinks, and we should get to the bottom of it.
Well, indeed, you can see the NASDAQ call volume spiking minutes before the 90-day tariff pause was suddenly announced. In practice, the global economic system favors the US, of course, as the hegemon. This week, Steve Moran, the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors and a key Trump ally, of course, pushing tariffs, said the following. Today, I'd like to discuss the United States' provision of what economists call global public goods for the entire world. First, the United States provides a security umbrella, which has created the greatest era of peace mankind has ever known. Secondly, the US provides the dollar and treasury securities, reserve assets, which make possible the global trading and financial system, which has supported the greatest era of prosperity mankind has ever known. Now, Arnaud Bertrand, is he French? I just did a French accent for no reason if he isn't. But anyway, a very interesting entrepreneur and an economist said, this is batshit insane, no other way to put it. Well, to drive his point home, he says it's without a doubt the most dishonest piece of economic reading that I've ever had the misfortune to lay my eyes upon. That's because this Trump stooge is recasting the fact that the dollar is the global reserve currency as somehow a burden that the rest of the world needs to compensate the US for bearing. He notes that Iran explains that the dollar has caused persistent currency distortions and contributed, along with other countries, unfair barriers to trade, to unsustainable trade deficits which have decimated our manufacturing sector. But he doesn't want to scrap the reserve dollar status, arguing that America's financial dominance cannot be taken for granted, and the Trump administration is determined to preserve it, but this same financial dominance comes at a cost and other nations need to pay for it. So he argues that countries would need to pay the Treasury to help the US finance public goods. Now, as Bertrand puts it, let's pause a moment here to contemplate the sheer insanity of this. The US is literally suggesting that countries should mail checks to the US Treasury as tribute for the privilege of maintaining the dollar as a global reserve currency, when it is this very reserve status of the dollar that is the cornerstone of US power. It's the equivalent of Samson asking everyone to pay him to keep his hair, the biblical story he's referring to there. As Bertrand explains, the reserve currency status of the dollar allows the US to quite literally have its way of life subsidized by the rest of the world. Other countries, said Bertrand, have to balance their books eventually, but the reserve status of the dollar means the US can uniquely consume more than it produces indefinitely. So, in Bertrand's words, he's very wise. On this subject, very wise. I'll keep quoting him. So yes, sure, because America can effectively buy most of what it needs from the rest of the world for free by printing dollars, this situation doesn't exactly create incentives to do the hard work of manufacturing goods domestically. But framing this as other countries taking advantage of America rather than America taking advantage of its currency domination is an astonishing inversion of reality. Now, let's just listen to the economics professor, Richard D. Wolff.
It is a big risk being taken by Mr. Trump, and if it doesn't go well, it'll be very bad for the American economy. It will produce the recession folks are worried about, because if the prices go up, people buy less, and that loses jobs. When you look at all of this, this is an incredibly risky effort to blame the world, punish the world, and then cross his fingers, which is what he's doing, hoping it comes out all right. Reminds me of the football metaphor. This is a Hail Mary pass. You throw it down the field. You hope it bounces into your team's hands. But that's all it is, a long shot. And it's a sign of how troubled the American economy now is.
You see, it's interesting. The average US household is set to lose an estimated $3,800 in purchasing power because of the tariffs, with the poorest 20% of US earners being hit the most proportionately. That's according to data from Yale Budget Lab presented in the media outlet Axios. Now, this is important because one of the key reasons Trump came to power was because the broken economic system produces stagnating or declining living standards for so many Americans. But of course, the Trumpian answer isn't to address it, but actually make it considerably worse. Well, we are looking at the potential collapse of the dollar as the reserve currency. Okay, maybe not next week, but that's been accelerated by this, whenever it does actually happen. And crucially, this helps the rise of China. Indeed, note how every crisis of the 21st century accelerates the rise of China. China can increasingly present itself, of course, as a dependable, stable status quo power, if you like. Now, if you combine this with the recent destruction of US aid, well, China just happily steps into the void there, doesn't it? In order to expand its power and influence across the world. Now, look, I've got an interest to declare here. I'm currently writing The Fall of the West. More information on that soon, but it's a book due to come out next year. The major question being, will that title be past tense by that point? But the triumphalism of the end of the Cold War was hubris, which has met nemesis. The idea at the time, as you'll remember, the West was economically, militarily, and morally superior and had actually not just won the Cold War, but won the battle of history forever. Now, economically, the neoliberal order has been in perpetual crisis, not least since the 2008 financial crash. Militarily, the West suffered calamitous military strategic defeat in Afghanistan and Iraq in particular. Morally, the historic crimes of the West aside, the atrocities of the so-called war on terror morally disgraced the West. And of course, whatever remained of those supposed moral claims is buried in the rubble of Gaza, along with thousands of decomposing Palestinians. Indeed, the unity of the West, specifically the alliance between the US and Europe, has fallen apart, not least over Russia and Ukraine, and the abandonment of US security guarantees. We're witnessing the fall of the West in real time. Now, the tragedy is we don't have something just to replace it, rather just bloody chaos and authoritarianism, and sort of gruesome great power rivalry. The battle ahead is to create a just alternative rather than have any great power domination. And whether or not we achieve that, well, I think that will decide the future of our species. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments. Help us as we take on the pro-Western imperialist media, I suppose. Sorry, I don't care if I sound like a, Soviet press release from 1956. It is what it is. Much of our media just follows the foreign policy positions of our Western elites. It's true, isn't it? I mean, it's just a fact. Anyway, patreon.com/Jones84. We have expanded our operation all thanks to you. You've made that all possible. We're reaching millions of people every month because of you. We've got lots of interviews and stuff ahead. You can listen to us on the podcast, but press like, subscribe, leave comments. I'll speak to you in a bit.